From beautiful downtown Millheim, in the smack dab center of the Keystone State, this is Lou Bryson with Seen Through a Glass, the podcast that's mostly about food and drink in central Pennsylvania. Welcome to episode 52, Salmon in Central PA? I've told you that we moved from the Philly suburbs to Millheim because we both grew up in small towns, but also, at least partly, because we truly loved the brew pub here, the Elk Creek Cafe. One of the reasons was that they tried to use local foods and support local agriculture. This sometimes led to jokes at their expense when the menu would feature, say, fried oysters or avocados. Ah, those Penns Valley avocados, they must grow them in the southern end of the valley. But when we started going to the local farm markets, we ran into Capt'n Brigham, who was selling frozen salmon that he'd caught. I mean, we're coming up on trout season. Was there a Penns Creek salmon run, too? Of course not. I'm just kidding. Captain Dan catches his salmon in Alaska, along the southeast coast. And I soon learned there are other salmon fishers right here in central PA. Abe Rovansek's Kodiak Rush in Bellefonte, and Steve Kurian's Wild For Salmon operation in Bloomsburg. I took the opportunity to interview Steve when I did the Danville episode visits recently, and I have that interview for you today. I think it's one of the better ones, and you're going to enjoy it. But I also talked to Captain Dan and Captain Abe. Well, I actually talked to his dad, Ron, because Abe was on the road selling fish. I'll tell you what they had to say and how these operations are the same and how they're different. In the end, I learned that fishing for wild salmon in Alaska and bringing it back to Pennsylvania to sell, sometimes all over the country, is not as crazy as it sounds. New technology has made it possible, and Alaskans are doing a lot to keep it sustainable as well. What else? Well, I did buy some Wild For Salmon sockeye fillets, and I've been waiting to use a Christmas present my family got me, a soapstone insert for my Kamado Joe grill, and the salmon, with some nice spring asparagus, was the perfect opportunity. I made dinner for Kathy and I on the grill last night, and I'll tell you about that too. Let's get started. And you know what that means? Here's what I'm drinking today. What I'm drinking today is the newest beer from that local brew pub, Elk Creek Cafe. It's so new, it just went on tap today, April 2nd. It's brewer Eric Shadle's first cream ale called Valley Vista. Now, what is a cream ale? It's actually somewhat controversial in beer geek circles, but it's a beer made with some corn or rice, Eric used corn, fermented with ale yeast, but matured at a colder temperature, like a lager. Probably. The thing is, if you make a cream ale in the northeastern United States, it is going to be compared to Jenny Cream Ale from Genesee Brewery in Rochester. That's an tip kind of beer, one that's deep in the DNA of any beer drinker in the area who's over 40 years old. Jenny Cream was the first keg I ever bought, for instance, on the occasion of my 21st birthday. Maybe it was my 20th. Things were a lot looser in the late 70s. How does Valley Vista compare to Jenny Cream, then? Let's find out. It's time to crack open this crowler, provided by Elk Creek for this episode, with my thanks. The Valley Vista actually pours a little bit hazy, and I use that term advisedly. It is not brilliant, as they say, completely transparently clear, but it's not, when you think of hazy IPA these days, you actually think of some particulate in the beer. This is actually hazy. It is a uniform haziness, and it makes this straw-colored light yellow beer a really interesting translucent shade. Nice cap of white foam on the top. This runs in the low 4% range. The aroma is, quite fresh. Even maybe just a tiny hint of sulfur, and which for some reason Germans think indicates a really fresh beer. So, it certainly is. Let's try it. Well, how does that compare to Jenny? It's a little bit, just a touch stickier than Jenny. And I have to believe that Jenny is fermented out pretty far to make it fairly dry. This is a bit chewier than that. Has a little more body than Jenny. It's not as highly carbonated. It's got a nice flavor to it. There's a bit of almost kind of a tang in the back. And some of that is going to be carbonation. Some of that is going to be maybe some acidity in the beer. Not tart in any way. No, mostly what this is a little bit sweet with a low-medium mouthfeel, a good cold drinking beer. I mean, it drinks pretty easy. It was really good. I had a pepperoni pizza at the brew pub tonight, and it went well with that. Cleansing. This is good. It's definitely got more body to it than your standard light lager, and yet it's doesn't really have the body of like even a pale ale. It's good standing right in the middle there. This is good. Nice work, Eric. Thanks. Before it's time to go fishing, it's time for Smack Dab in the Center, sponsored by the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau. Hey, it's a fish episode. Let's talk about fishing. Because Center County has over 216 miles of trout fishing streams, some of the best in the state, some of the best in the eastern U.S. I mean, there's a fishing preserve on Spring Creek that's called Fisherman's Paradise. How on the nose do you want? The fly fishing on Penns Creek in my area brings plenty of people to the area for opening day, and the Green Drake Hatch brings the trout swarming to feed. There are lodges for anglers in the area, convenient to the streams. Do you want to fish when the trout aren't biting? You're in luck. We've got lakes full of perch, catfish, and bass just waiting to grab that lure. Try the big, beautiful Blackmush Shannon, set in miles of woods, or the Foster Joseph Sayers Reservoir, where you can rent a boat and get right out there on the water. And, if you don't want to fish, you can just take the boat. Happy Valley has many places for kayakers and canoers to enjoy the thrill of seeing what's around the next river bend. Happy Valley's always an adventure. You can find more information about fishing and boating and beautiful places to stay while you're enjoying them under the Explore tab at the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau website, happyvalley.com. Now, I might be interviewing Steve Kurian at Wild For Salmon in this episode, but I'm going to start with talking to Captain Dan Brigham, because his story gives you a better idea of why these folks go to Alaska in the first place. You see, Captain Dan started with fish right here in Penns Valley, running a trout hatchery. And you might think that a trout hatchery in the midst of renowned trout-stocked fly fishing streams might sound like real job security, but problems with runoff management led Dan to close the hatchery and look for another career with fish. He started looking at fisheries on the Atlantic, but eventually came to the realization that, as he put it, the only place with fish is Alaska. And people want the fish they have in Alaska: salmon, cod, rockfish, halibut. Dan fishes in the southeast coastal waters north of Juneau with a trolling rig, 4 cables on motorized winches, with multiple lines and hooks on each cable. He and his crew do all the processing right there on the boat: kill, bleed, gut, and fillet. Then they put the fillets in the freezing cabinet, a compartment with aluminum shelves. In an hour, Dan said, it's frozen solid. I could whack you with it like a baseball bat. They dip the fillet in 28-degree salt water to put an insulating layer of ice on it, and then stack them like planks in the freezer hold. He'll fish from July to early September. At the end of the harvest, the fish gets flown to Seattle, and Dan drives home with a cooler full of fish for himself. The rest goes by freezer truck to Imler's Poultry in Altoona, where Dan rents freezer space. As I said, I also talked to Ron Rovansek of Kodiak Rush. Ron and his son Abe fish in various places in Alaska, but Abe is mostly fishing for Pacific cod and salmon, while Ron does rockfish and ling cod. The ling cod is neither a ling fish or a cod, but it is startlingly ugly, and it's good eating. Ron's catching on either a setup similar to Dan's or an actual rod and reel. Almost every legal ling cod is caught on rod and reel, he told me. Now, Abe and Ron only started their business recently. This is their 4th year, but Abe's been fishing as a deckhand in Alaska for years. Ron laughed. All you need to be a deckhand is a willing attitude and not minding discomfort. And maybe no need for sleep, I asked him. That helps, he confirmed. But while costs for fishing have gone up, supplies, fuel, licenses, the dock price for fish has gone down. If you want to continue in fishing, you have to get your own boat, Ron told me. I was curious about how the fish actually get from flopping on the deck to my freezer. Well, that's the hard part, isn't it? Ron told me. The fishing and the wind and the waves and the whales, that's the fun part. Ron and his crew will gut and fillet the rockfish and ling cod on the boat and pack them on ice, then run a full hold back to the processing plant on shore, where they vacuum pack and flash freeze them. Abe's crew catches the salmon with gill nets, and they get a lot at a time. Well, ideally. So there's not a lot of time to fillet all of them. They kill and bleed out all of them, rinse them, get them on ice as quickly as possible. I asked about the size. Ron told me that a Cook Inlet sockeye salmon runs about 6 to 7 pounds, rockfish is about 25 pounds, and the ling cod run up to around 45 pounds. Now, for comparison, a halibut, which none of these guys fish for, the licenses are too expensive, might be a 200-pound fish. Kodiak Rush, like Wild For Salmon, sells subscriptions as well. You get a box of frozen seafood every month, which, yum. But Ron and Abe are looking at maybe doing a subscription for dog owners. Frozen salmon heads are really cheap from the canneries. It's what dog sledders feed their huskies. So, maybe. Now, I forgot to ask Captain Dan how he likes his fish, but I did ask Ron. He's pretty basic, he said. He just likes to bake the fillets skin down with olive oil, salt, and pepper. He also likes fish cakes. He says there's a whole world of fish cakes recipes out there. Cooked fish, some kind of binder, some egg, and then seasoning. Onion, garlic, cilantro and lime, Old Bay, anything. I have fun with those. He also talked about a favorite boat dinner. Mr. Yoshida's teriyaki sauce, which is a favorite in both Alaska and Hawaii and can be found locally at Costco, is the key. Put a fillet of fish in the pan, skin side up, then flip it and take the skin off. If it's cooked enough, the skin will slide right off, which I can confirm. Add teriyaki sauce and let it go till the sauce thickens up. Sounds good to me. Now it's Steve's turn. I hope you've got your juices flowing because this interview is going to jump right into being on the boat. Get your overalls and boots on. Hey, I'm here with Steve Kurian, the co-owner of Wild For Salmon in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. How you doing today?
Good, Lou. How are you?
I'm good. I've had your salmon. I've seen your stand at the farm market in Bellefonte, and here we are. It's something. But listen, I usually start these interviews with, how'd you get into this? But I just have to, what's it like going out fishing in Alaska? Tell me that. Put me on the boat.
Oh, it's my favorite part of the whole business, right? So it's like a great camping trip. You go to Alaska, we have to fly there. You can't get there by road. The only way in is by airplane or by boat.
And where is it in Alaska?
We're in Bristol Bay, which is western Alaska, but it's the southeast corner of the Bering Sea.
Oh, okay. All right. So out where the islands start pushing out?
Where the Aleutian chain starts to push out, it forms an armpit to the upper side, to the north side, and that forms Bristol Bay.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Yeah, so we pretty much, I get all my stuff ready to go. We fly up, get to the airport in King Salmon. There's only a 10-mile road between the airport and King Salmon, which is an old naval or an Air Force base, and Naknek, which is a town of 400 people in the winter.
Wow.
And it balloons to 10,000 in the summer.
Oh, my God. All for fishing?
Yes, all for fishing.
Wow.
So you're talking about remote bush towns that just come alive for the summer and for the whole salmon migration and harvest. And
how long a period is that?
Basically, we're getting there around June 10th to the 15th, depending on how much boat work we have. Fishing starts around, I would say, June 20th, and then it's over by August 1st in a harvestable amount. There's always some fish trickling in on the early side and then fish trickling in at the end of the run that is not worth the energy put forth to catch them. There's just not enough.
Yeah.
But so it's a pretty short season. That's the love of it. And so we get the boat ready to go. Pretty much a tractor, an articulated tractor, farm tractor with a trailer, comes and plugs in underneath you, jacks you up, They take you down to the water and shove you in.
And this is what, like a 30-foot boat?
32 foot.
32?
32 foot by law. You can't have one longer than that.
Oh.
They can be any width. And so with new technology and everything the guys have done, they've kind of like made them bigger and bigger width-wise, so they have more motors and more capacity. But by one of the biologists' ways of managing the fleet is to limit the length of the boat. So we're restricted to that 32-foot length. So we put the boat in. Once the boat's in the water, you kind of shake down crews, make sure everything's good, double check, and then you start.
And how many people on the boat?
There's 4 of us in when we start, and then in the peak we add an extra guy in.
Okay.
So pretty much boat's ready, shakedown's been done, and then you start to watch the fish migration and see which of the 5 rivers are going to happen.
Okay.
And I have my personal preference of where I like to fish, where I feel like I'm the best fisherman. Some of that's due to the style of the river, the way they manage it. And then you have the biologists put out a prediction for the year, so it's already out on how many fish are going to return back to Bristol Bay. So like we're roughly at, I think, that 53 million fish mark. Going to return this year, and then they break that down per river, so you can use that data to be like, well, I'd like to fish the Nushagak. It's got a good run. It's one of my favorite places to fish, so I'm going to go there this year. And then you can also look at how many boats are going to be there. Like you play your cards, right, of strategy.
Sure.
Where you're going to be able to do the best work. So once the fish start to show up and the biologists start to see some fish coming up the river, which they're counting them as they swim up. And they've also got some sonar, and then they do aerial. So they have a good idea of how many fish are going up per day.
Okay.
And they're working off an escapement curve that allows them to say, well, it's June 20th, go ahead and fish. Or it's July 15th, and there's not enough fish up the river to meet the escapement goal, so we're going to shut you down for a day. So they kind of manage it on a tide-by-tide basis.
Wow, okay.
And
what, you get a phone call? Or
it's on the local radio. And
gosh. Okay.
And then now it's also gone to like text messages and stuff like that. But typically it would just have been on the local radio channel. You just tune in and listen.
Like a snow day.
Yeah, like 6. It's at 9 a.m., noon, 3, 6. And so you just tune in at that time to see when your next announcement's going to be.
Wow. And you get the word, and you like scramble for the boat, or? Well,
we're on the boat, so basically, as the season unfolds, you kind of get your idea of where you're going to go. So the biologists are about ready to open it up to fish, and so you'll head over to that district and be ready. And we have a permit card that allows us to fish, so it's our license to fish. And one of the other tools the biologists use is you have to drop that permit in that district. So you have to sign up to fish in that district. Once you commit to a district, then you're committed to there unless you want to change districts, and then you got to sit out for 48 hours. Oh. So that's the big wild card and gamble that you have.
Yeah, this is all strategy, isn't it? I didn't realize.
There's a lot of strategy and a little bit of sleep. And so
Jeez, this could make a video game.
Right.
Wow.
So then once the season gets rolling, typically you start fishing one tide a day. So you'll fish for 8 hours, offload the fish, clean the boat, go to sleep, and then the next day kind of go again.
And when we say fishing, you're netting?
Gill netting.
Gill netting.
So the boats have a reel on the back, so a drum that winds the net in. We have 1,200 foot of gill net, so you spool that out. Put it in front of the fish, kind of steer it around to capture as much as you can.
And they're kind of just single-mindedly headed up the river.
They're just migrating.
Yeah, you're not trying to lure them or bait them or anything. You're just putting a net in their way.
No, yeah. Okay. I like to think of it as an underwater migration of snow geese.
Okay.
So, that's what's happening in Bristol Bay. There's this, out of the North Pacific in the Bering Sea, this big migration of salmon starts to happen, and they funnel in through Bristol Bay and then up all the rivers and tributaries. One of the things I've always thought about is like thinking of them that way. You start to envision the fish as a migration, and it helps you see them in the water. Because really we're going off instinct of whether you're seeing fish jump out of the water, or you're maybe seeing finners, or you're just trying a location that in the past has been productive on that type of tide, and so there's no sonar off the boats that tell you where fish are. It's all just kind of like sport fishing in a sense of like, maybe I should cast over there.
Wow. I mean, you're not allowed to have sonar, or
It doesn't work because of the fish are in the top tier of water. They're in the top 10 foot of water, and there's 22 foot of tide variation. So every 6 hours that it's really going back and forth, a lot of silt in the water. You know,
okay.
And sonar's not really designed. I imagine that there's some probably newer technology out there that would work, but it
Looking at the waterworks too?
Yeah, it hasn't taken over yet.
Okay. So how long are you out there?
Yeah, so we're out for about 40 days. So we start fishing, and typically, like I said, it's one tide a day, and then as soon as the fish start to show, and then on a good season, then we go to 2 tides a day. So you fish eight hours, take usually like 6 hours off, which is 2 hours to get your fish unloaded, clean the boat, 2 hours to sleep, and then an hour to get up and go look for more fish. So you get into this rhythm of just sleeping 2 or 3 hours, fishing for 8 to 10, offloading, cleaning the boat, sleeping, and you just every tide you're fishing. And that's the crazy part of it is just like to be thinking that like you're going to fish from noon to 8 p.m. and then you're going to offload fish from 8 to 10, and then you're going to sleep from 10 to midnight, and then you're going to get up and you're going to start looking for fish for a 2 o'clock a.m. opener, right? Like, and so you're going back to work at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And so one of the funny things on the boat, we're always like, anytime you wake up, it's always morning. So it's like, good morning, let's have breakfast.
Wow. So you said offload, and I'm going completely off track on my questions here. But I can't stop now. Offloading. What do you do with the fish when you catch them?
So once we catch the fish, they come onto the back deck in the net. You shake them out by hand.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's like they're caught in the gills. So it's a triangular shaped net. That mesh that they swim into gets in their head, neck, and then you shake them out by hand and use your fingers to pry the webbing out under their gills. Shake them onto the deck, and then we have
1,200 feet of net. How many fish are we talking about
in a set? You can have anywhere from 0 fish,
yeah.
or you can all the way up to 10,000 pounds.
Oh my God!
Like it can take you a couple 2 hours to get through that gear, or it can take you 15 minutes.
Okay, and an average salmon.
An average salmon is about 5 pounds.
Okay,
and I would say most of your sets are 100 to 250 fish, somewhere in there.
Okay,
and when the peak migration, you throw your net right in front of a ball of fish, they'll sink them at times. And that's what you hope for.
Right. Okay, so you've got loose fish on your deck.
And then we have one guy with a set of knee pads and a knife, and he's
really
bleeding.
Wow.
So he's crawling around the deck.
Oh, I saw that on the website. Okay.
Bleeding every fish. And that's the kind of the grunt job, if you will.
This is the new guy? Is that?
Yeah. Typically, that's the new guy, and you're just testing him out if he can handle that.
Yeah, and this is to keep him fresh. Is that?
Well, yeah. So the idea is to get the blood out of the system, and then it freezes better, quality's better.
Okay.
You don't get the bruising of the fish. There's some different thoughts on it and whether it's worth it or not. Some of the processors are kind of like wavering right now on maybe it's too much effort put forth, but I would say from my experience, like it's definitely worth doing, and it's the right thing to do for quality.
Okay. And after that, you get a chiller?
They drop into our fish holds
Okay.
where we have brailers hung, and those brailers are like a burlap sack that hangs like in an ice cube tray almost. The deck looks like an ice cube tray. And then in those trays, it's got spray rails that put refrigerated seawater, and it circulates. So once those fish are caught, bled, they go in the brailer, they're in the floating seawater, being chilled down to the anywhere from 33 to 39 degree water.
And the brailer is to keep them from sloshing around?
The brailer is to keep them. So when you get to, you imagine your bag right there, with the straps, brailer is the same. So when you get to offload them, you run what we call the Pelican and the Pelican straps through those straps, and then hook them back to the scale. They lift those brailers out of your fish hole.
And the water just drains out.
Water drains out.
Okay.
They weigh your fish, and then they put it in their in the tender, the belly of the tender, in refrigerated water.
And this is a larger ship. You come alongside of.
Correct. So we tie up to them. We offload to them.
And you're still out in the bay.
Well, sometimes we're in the bay, but a lot of times when you're offloading, you're either tucked against the beach or you're up the river.
Okay.
And then once we offload, then those tenders run the fish back to the plant. So depending on which river we're at, it could be anywhere from a 30-mile run to a 60-mile run for them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then they have another tender that's sitting there to give us fuel, water, and services. Okay. Because we're, at this point, if we're not in Naknek, where you're right in the home port, they're very small native villages and almost nothing there. Mm-hmm. So you're just really a bunch of boats anchored where the river meets the bay. Mm-hmm. And if the wind is blowing a certain direction, we got to get behind a sandbar to offload. So like depending on how the weather's going, sometimes they can only take fish on one side because you get the crowd kicked out of you on the other side, and snapping lines and busting stuff. So it can get, it's kind of the most dangerous part of the job, I feel like.
There is real danger here sometimes?
Yeah, there's real danger for sure. We had, unfortunately, a close boat of mine last year had a guy get the rope around his neck and like ripped overboard and killed. So that was kind of a real eye opener, because I mean, I've been around it for maybe 24 season, and usually 2 or 3 guys don't make it through the season just because of falling overboard. Just all kinds of stuff. Like there was another guy we lost last year that just went out at 2:00 in the morning to take a whiz and fell overboard, and they never found him. So it is definitely a dangerous fishery.
And do you fish in bad weather?
I guess if you would call 55-mile-an-hour winds and 14-foot seas bad, then yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the fun of it, and it's also the scary part of it is that, when the weather is bad and the wind is blowing, typically on the front end of a storm, it'll push whatever fish are there. Oh. So it drives a big pulse of fish up the river. Okay. So you almost never not want to fish in a storm. The boats are built for it. We're built for it. We're I feel like most of the boats now can handle the weather, handle the poundage. But
I would assume that broad beam probably helps too.
Yes, you definitely, the old narrow beam boats roll a lot of rolling. Yeah. And guys get pushed up on the beach, get the net in their wheel and shuts the engine down. And so there's just all kinds of things that can happen. And that's why they pay us, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. This can't be the kind of job that your high school guidance counselor tells you about. How did you wind up doing this?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So I graduated from Penn State in forestry and moved to Idaho, took a job at the state there, and rented off of a retired airline pilot he was also fighter pilot, smoke jumper, commercial fisherman. And he talked me into quitting my state job.
Not any kind of adrenaline junkie at all then?
No.
Wow.
He talked me into quitting my state job to go fish in Alaska and, painted this great picture and all this money you're going to make. So basically we went up there for the summer, and it was one of the worst summers that we had production-wise and pay-wise. So I made $1,400. My wife, my girlfriend at the time, Jen, wife now, she came up to help because the neighbor needed help. And they paid her airline ticket in exchange for her work. But we had a blast. It was just like, it was camping on the beach. We were set netting.
And I mean, it's gorgeous, right?
Yeah, bears running around.
Oh, my God.
Sport fishing, eating salmon all the time.
Yeah.
Like what not to love. Who needs to be paid, right?
I mean, eventually, but...
Well, yeah. When you're 22, you don't really need the money anyway.
No.
So we did a summer of set netting. Loved it, decided to go back the next summer, and the guy that I was fishing for, his 2 sons had drift gill netters, which are the boats that we use and go out in the bay. Due to some financial issues, they bought their stepson a permit to put in his name. They didn't trust him because he was having some issues with the family, and so they decided to put it in my name, and then they were trying to find a captain to run the boat that they had just bought for the stepson. Uh-huh. Couldn't find anybody, so they're like, well, can you run a boat? And I was like, well, I can run a log skidder and a bulldozer. I think I can do this. So that was the credentials.
Big things with motors, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and then I can never forget the first one of the first outings. We're going through this like heavy waves, and the anchor came out of the anchor chocks and slammed on the deck, and I was like, "Holy smokes!"
But you're in it now.
Yeah, we learned quick. Quick.
Dang.
So I just kind of got thrown into it, and it's kind of that's my personality, is kind of to be the adventurous one. And so it fit me well. And then I grew up, my father was a custom butcher, so we butchered everything for ourselves. And so I had this, background of sport fishing and butchering. And then so I filleted a bunch of fish on the beach, brought them home for my family, and that's how we got started selling salmon.
Okay. Because it's a long way from catching fish for somebody else to catching fish for yourself and selling it. I mean, you're wholesaling it, retailing it.
Yeah, we're selling online, retail. We've got our store and cafe now, and then wholesale. So yeah, we've got a few channels going on.
Yeah, I mean, you're selling it by the box, right?
Yeah, everything from the box to the fillet to the portion. So we have a great offering and selection, and we like to keep that because it's like some of our online competitors have kind of necked that down for consistency and ease of process. But we like to offer our customers, if you want a whole fillet, you want a king salmon fillet, you want a sockeye fillet.
Well, actually, that's something I wanted to ask you about. Since you brought it up, how many different kinds of salmon do you sell, and are they all running that same migration route?
They all run in the same migration route. Bristol Bay is really the biggest sockeye fishery on the planet.
Okay.
And that is what the fishery is set up to target. During that fishery, we catch a few kings, we catch 1% of chums, and then at the very end of the season, pinks and silvers show up. But our chums and sockeye come out of Bristol Bay, and then our kings, coho, and pinks come out of Southeast Alaska. So one of the guys I fished with in the bay, he lives in Juneau. He goes back there and finishes out his season after the bay. So we have him put up the fish that we want. Because he's got the same morals, ethics, kind of desire to have the best quality fish on the market.
Okay. And once the fish go to the, I'm sorry, I'm out of order here. But
you'll be out of order all day.
Yeah, everything just brings up more questions. The fish go onto the tender. What does the tender do with them?
So the tender just makes sure that they're refrigerated and then runs them as soon as the tide, usually we're delivering at the bottom of the tide, so at low tide, as soon as they have enough water, then they run them back to the plant to be processed. So the Bristol Bay is, it's got these 5 major river systems. Only really one of the rivers has the majority of the processing plants on it. And because we can be catching, 1 million fish a day as a fleet, they need to have the capacity to handle this big volumes. And so the tenders run them to the plant, pump them into the plant, and then they have, 200 to 500 workers. And automated fillet machines, head and gut machines. Like, it's all very high speed to keep up with the flow of fish and to keep those fish at peak performance, peak quality, and get them through the pipeline. Early days, they would just can them, so they didn't really care about the quality.
Right.
And then it went to an H&G frozen product, and then in the last 15 years, the frozen fillet has really kind of taken the space in the market. And it gives us a very consistent product that's, that you couldn't get it any fresher unless you were there taking it off the dock.
And these people that are at the plant, they're pretty much as seasonal as you are?
Yes,
mostly?
Everybody's seasonal.
Okay.
I mean, everybody's seasonal. And the guys that run the plant, they go back to Seattle or wherever they're at and kind of plan for the next year. But basically it just ramps up and disappears.
And the locals, sell you coffee? Is that?
Some of the locals fish.
Okay.
They've got their set net sites. They've got some drift boats. And then a lot of them, they work in the infrastructure that it takes to keep the town and everything running to support that big of an influx of people.
Gotcha.
So there's a decent amount of winter jobs just kind of holding down the fort up there.
I guess, yeah. Yeah, but it's, so isolated.
Yes, very isolated. Yeah. Next stop to the west is Russia.
Okay. You mentioned the other kinds of salmon. What other kind of fish do you sell? I mean, I saw a bunch of fish downstairs. Where are they coming from? And
yeah, so once we started selling sockeye, then that we were catching ourselves, then we started to reach out to some of the other guys we fish with, and because they're Alaskans, they live there year round. They have other fishing boats, permits, so they catch our black cod, lingcod, rockfish, The other salmon species, when crab's in season, we'll buy that directly from a processor, because there is no small boat. For the most part, there is no small boat crab fishery in the Bering Sea. So like our king crab, that'll just come out of a processor. And then they just finished up the Baradai crab out of Southeast, which Chris, one of the guys that I get a lot of our product from, and he just kind of put up a couple 1,000 pounds for us. And, it's really nice to have those connections, because those guys are, they're on the water, they're on the boat, they know what's going on, and they make sure that the quality is the standards that we want.
Mm-hmm. When we get that, I mean, I'm going to buy some fish myself. Well, okay, so if I get that at the store here in Bloomsburg, how touchy do I have to be about getting it home? I mean, it's pretty cold frozen?
Yeah, all of our freezers are pretty much in the negative. So you basically want to get that, keep it in a box, in a cooler, in a cooler bag, any of those things. 3/4 of the year when it's cooler out, it's no problem. You just don't want it to sit and defrost completely. Yeah. And even if it defrosted just a smidge, it wouldn't lose a lot of value or a lot of quality.
And it's cryopacked too, is that right?
Right. It's vac packed, so it can go right back in the freezer. We don't really have there's really no issue other than the heat of the summer and leaving it in a plastic bag on your front seat.
Yeah. So when I get it home, I put it in the freezer. How long is it good in the freezer?
Most of the standards are in the vac packed industry is like 2 years shelf life once it's vac packed. Our goal here at Wild for Salmon is to be sold out by the time the next harvest comes. So every year we strive to be sold out by the time the new fish comes in, and that's something we've prided ourselves on. Even if we have a little bit of extra, we kind of like pull it out and put the new fish in. So we say a year. We guarantee our product for a year. Okay. The biggest thing is once you get it home to your freezer that you kind of like keep it in a box or something that doesn't allow it to bump around.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, you're bumping it and bruising it.
Well, you won't necessarily bruise it, but you open up the vac pack. The hard the plastic under freezing conditions bumped around will crack open. So the most complaints that we get in a year are all due to like vac packs coming unsealed, and there's a natural 2.5%. Vac pack failure. We get most of those here. We sort them out and we catch them. But then
that's on the trip from there to here.
Either there or just like as they're boxed, as we're boxing them. And then, there's a small percent that happens in the homeowner's freezer. And they happen in my freezer, whether it's with deer meat, salmon, and you look for them. When you see one open, you use it up first. And if it's, if it's a piece of salmon, it's too freezer burned or it's a little more, then I'll like smoke it sometimes just to use it or put it in a soup. Yeah. So there's a variety of things you can do, but for the most part, the technology on vac packing has come a long way. Mm-hmm. Early days were I had seen some batches that were 30% open. Wow. And because they were just kind of getting that technology dialed in, but now it's really kind of really protects that fish all year.
Good. When it's time to cook. Thawing frozen stuff drives me nuts. What's the best way to do that? Yeah,
for me, I just throw it in the sink with cold water. And just tap water, and then, within 20 minutes it's thawed. And then you can just take it right to the stove and go from there. If I plan ahead, which are very rarely, you can just put it in the fridge and let it sit there and just kind of open up the bag to give a little air to it. And then let it just sit there overnight and you're ready to go.
Gotcha. And favorite way to prepare? I would assume you have several.
Oh yeah, that's the hard part, right? It's like how to do. One of my favorite ways is always smoked salmon. I love smoking salmon, and I love kind of it in that form. It kind of
hot smoke, cold smoke. Yes.
Hot smoked for the most part. Yeah. It's kind of that traditional way to eat salmon. I think of the native kind of ways, but then. I gotta say, when I hot smoke salmon, there are no leftovers. Right.
It's just people just keep eating until it's gone. Even if there's only two of us, it's gone. Yeah.
Totally. No, it's our kids love it, and but then if I take it to either the grill or cast iron, one of my favorite ways to do it when I get back from Alaska is use garlic. So I put olive oil, crushed garlic, salt and pepper, and then basil leaves, and then slices of tomato, and bake it that way. And it's just it's really moist, and it just kind of like fresh and garden. Mm-hmm. Really like it that way. And then we've got a variety of dry rubs that kind of we'll put on it and just put in the oven. Mm-hmm. There's just like no way not to do it.
We just started roasting salmon in like the last month. My God, that's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and it doesn't take long at all. You don't have to overcook it because it's sushi grade. So, you just get it to where it flakes, but it still looks somewhat rare, is the way I kind of explain it.
Yeah.
And that's perfect. Once you take any fish to the dried out section, and that's where I see customers like needing help with their cooking, is like they don't recognize how important it is to time that.
Yeah.
And when it's medium and you take it off, if you let it sit for 5 minutes, it keeps cooking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm always hyper focused on.
I got to be honest. That's the one thing, because I'm looking at the price down there, and I'm like, okay, it's the quality, and then I'm like, yeah, but am I going to screw it up at home? That's what
Well, we've heard that a lot over the years, and I love the part of having the cafe here now, is because people can try it. They can have a sockeye sandwich and see what it's like, supposed to look like finished.
Yeah.
And get to taste it that way. And then if they have any questions, they can come in and talk to Nicole, our chef, or any of our store staff, knowledgeable. And that's people don't know a lot about seafood. And so,
especially in Central PA,
right. We're not really in.
No, it's not like you're on the Jersey Shore. Yeah.
So we really like to help people learn how to cook.
Cool, that's good. And there's recipes on the website.
Yeah, the recipe wildforsalmon.com's got plenty of recipes on there. It's a great resource.
That's great. We talked a little bit about sustainability. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so sustainability in Bristol Bay is amazing. I mean, it's one of the poster childs for sustainable fishery, and there's two reasons. One being that it's one of the kind of last fisheries to be developed. We got to learn from all the other issues that have happened out there.
And that's just because it is so remote?
Yes.
Okay.
And so then also as Alaska was formed in the Constitution, it was kind of put in there to make sure that the fisheries were managed for sustainability.
Oh, nice.
And the biologists, the other interesting part about Bristol Bay is like there is a test fishery that happens out of Port Moller, which is like 7 days from us fish travel time.
Okay.
So they test those fish, and those, what we call stations, they're specific spots on the map that they fish every day. And then they have an equation that gives you, how much volume, an index of volume that's passing by those stations. And then just in the last 15 years, they've been able to do scale samples, which from those scale samples, they can tell which river they're going to. So they're able to say, like, the index is 100. And
when you say scale sample, you're talking about the scales on the fish.
Yeah, the scales can tell them what river they came from. So they'll say, like, the Igigik River is getting 25% of that day's sample. Naknak's getting 6%. So the biologists can use those numbers and help manage the fishery, along with how many fish have already gone up the river and all their past data to get their escapement. So they have a set escapement.
You've used that word before. What does that mean, escapement?
Escapement is how many fish get up the river and have escaped to spawn and reproduce.
Oh, okay. So how many are getting past you?
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes. Past the counting tower,
Gotcha.
where only the bears can eat them after that. So.
And they do, I'm sure.
That's another amazing story. So yeah, the great part about Bristol Bay is that we can see the fish coming. We know the data. We have the data that we're projecting how many fish are coming. And then we know what we need up each river to make it a productive hatchery, if you will, even though it's not a hatchery. It's a productive breeding ground to put enough fish back in the ocean to then just allow that to be sustainable. And the biologists do an amazing job at it, and they always err on the caution of the fish. Last year, it was somewhere around, I guess, the 13th of July, but the Naknak River had gotten behind on its escapement, and they shut us down for 2.5 days. So we just sat, the whole fleet just sat. So that'd be like saying the air pollution here in Bloomsburg is above a certain level, so there's going to be no work for 2 days. You all have to sit home and do nothing and get no money.
Don't drive. Don't
right?
do anything. Yeah.
You would imagine like what chaos that would bring, where in Bristol Bay, the fishermen are like, yep, get it. Like, we don't like it, but we know that it's the right thing to do.
I'm going to sleep now.
Right, yeah, catch up on your beauty sleep. Get the crew likes to get showers.
Yeah.
And they typically stink.
It's got to get stinky. Yeah. Wow. Why did you think this could work? I mean, I realize your family was in butchering, but it just seems nuts to bring fresh caught frozen salmon from Alaska to Bloomsburg.
Yeah, well, I don't think I ever thought about it that way. I think if you would have...
Was there much thinking involved?
No.
Really? There wasn't. Yeah.
No,
okay.
I mean, it was a passion, a love, and then like a need for survival. We were trying to make a living. I was running my tree care business. I was fishing in the summer, and then started selling salmon. My wife was working in Lancaster as a teacher, and she wasn't going to give up her teaching job until I got a real job. And so we were like, balancing all these things, and, you just did a little bit of each or a lot of each and trying to make ends meet. And then, one thing grows to the next, and then you got an employee, and then you're getting a truck, and, so it just happened. We were there, we were working hard trying to make it happen, but we were never planning. Like, I didn't never we're dreaming about making it into something this big.
So really, if this hadn't just been so damned awesome, you probably would have quit.
Yeah, I mean, I love to eat fish, and I love wild salmon. I love to go to Alaska. So it's like, I mean, it's the perfect storm.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, my roots, bases, whatever, are in the booze business, and there is a quote that has stuck with me. Tommy Dewar's Scotch. There is no joy like work. And for a while I thought, what kind of Scottish bullshit is that? But he's right. If it's what you love doing, nothing's better. Yeah,
you don't even think about it from the work point of view or what I'm getting paid or anything. You're just like happy to see people enjoying the product, enjoying what you enjoy, and it's all positive.
Yeah. There was one thing, and I mentioned this way earlier. We're in central Pennsylvania. We've got this frozen salmon coming in that seems like a really odd thing, and yet I know at least 2 other people that are doing it. Is it just here that they're doing it, or is this a thing?
No, it's a trend that has started across the country.
Wow.
So basically, like 4 years ago, 22 years ago, 20 years ago when we started Wild For Salmon, there was only a handful of us. And it was like vac pack salmon, like being able to vac pack it was just at the beginning stages. And a few of us fishermen started to bring it back to our hometowns and sell it. And then since then, that has grown quite a bit. There's probably 100, fishermen from Bristol Bay bringing salmon back at some capacity and either just selling it out of their garage or they've got a little web business and taking it to farmers markets. So yes, it's grown. And then I think the social media or people just being able to see what people are doing in Bristol Bay and understanding how to get into that fishery has also opened up more doors. And but yeah, there's I'll be in Jackson Hole, Wyoming the rest of this week selling salmon in Jackson. And then we've got deliveries in Vermont, and and there's people in those towns that go to Bristol Bay and fish and are selling salmon. So it's definitely transform the way we're getting wild seafood to customers. It doesn't just go through the retail.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. I think that, there was one other question. You have this, gorgeous new retail shop here, which like I said, I'm going to go down and get some fish. How much of your business is through this retail outlet? I assume that's growing since it's new. How much of it is mail order? How much of it is the restaurants and markets?
So right now it's the store and cafe is about 25%.
Oh wow, that was quick.
Online's about 25%, and then wholesale makes up about 40%, and then the rest of it is just kind of like pieced in there between farmers markets and our little buying clubs and things like that. Yeah. So our biggest part of our sales is definitely to the wholesale side, which is a lot of small health food stores. The Bloom Naturallys, the Kimmerton Whole Foods in the Philadelphia area.
I know them. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where just a little under 50% goes, and then and then the rest is kind of split out, like I said.
Yeah. Okay. That's it for me. That was great. Thank you.
That was fun.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah. Well, I'll see you some other time. Maybe at the farm market. I don't know, or maybe in Jackson Hole.
Yeah, there you go. Well, enjoy your whatever you get at the cafe today.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Yep. Take care.
Steve bought me lunch at the Wild For Salmon cafe in Bloomsburg that day. Full disclosure, as always. But I did buy some salmon burgers and a pack of sockeye fillet portions to take home. In a cooler bag, of course. I wanted to try them, but I also wanted to try out 2 new pieces of grilling kit I got for Christmas. A HomeRite electric charcoal lighter and a semicircular soapstone insert for my Kamado Joe grill. The soapstone's about 1.5 inches thick. That's for grilling fish or vegetables, low-fat patties like chicken or turkey burgers or salmon burgers. When it's lightly oiled, it's naturally non-stick, and there's no sticking to the grates either, so when you try to flip the fish, it's not going to fall apart. At least, that's the theory. So yesterday, I thawed 2 Wild For Salmon sockeye portions, about 1.5 inches thick, and brushed olive oil on them and dusted them with pepper. Keeping it simple, just like Steve said. Kathy trimmed up a pound of nice asparagus she got at Burkholder's Market here in Millheim. We put some olive oil and kosher salt on it. About 5:15, I lit the charcoal in the grill. I think I've mentioned that I use Humphrey's lump charcoal from Brookville, PA. You put the lighter up to the charcoal, not in it, just up against it, and push the rocker switch forward. This blows super hot air into the charcoal, and in only 15 seconds, it starts to glow orange. I gave it another 10 seconds of heat, and then rocked the switch back into the second position, which turns off the heat and just blows air on the glowing coals. The glow reached down into the next layer of charcoal and started to build. I did that same thing in 2 other spots, and then put the grate carrier in and closed the lid with the upper and lower vents wide open. When the temperature got to about 130 degrees, in about 5 minutes, I put the soapstone insert in, covering half the grill area, and put 2 potatoes on the other half to bake. Within 20 minutes, temperature was up to 450 degrees. I closed both vents to about half, let the temperature stabilize back down to 450, and then placed the salmon on the soapstone, skin down. It sizzled when it hit, but it didn't explode, so I set the timer for 3.5 minutes and put the lid down again. When the timer went off, I flipped the salmon, set the timer for 2 minutes, and tested the potatoes. Not quite there. Closed the lid. Timer went off. I pulled the salmon, and it was looking great. Wasn't overdone, Steve. Put a bit more oil on the stone and laid out the asparagus on it and closed the lid, setting the timer for 2 minutes. When it went off, I stirred the green stems around. They were starting to brown. I closed the lid again. In 2 more minutes, they were done, just barely starting to char, and the oil and salt smelling like slightly smoky popcorn. I scooped them up with tongs and grabbed the potatoes, closed the lid again, and shut the vents to smother the fire. Everything was great. The salmon was still kind of rare in the middle, juicy and flavorsome. The asparagus was bright green, not overdone, and so good, I would have had a full dish of that and been happy. The potatoes, well, I maybe should have oiled the skin. It was a bit limp. The insides are great, though. These are locally grown from Ardrey Farms, 2 valleys over. I want to do an episode with them soon. Great spuds. So it was a success. The lighter and soapstone work well, and I can't wait to use them again. And that salmon? Excellent. That's about it for this one, but before we go, I'd like to plug a friend's podcast, John Hall, who I talked to about food and beer pairing back in episode 43. John's involved with several podcasts, including Steal This Beer with brewer Augie Carton, which I've been on a couple times, and Think Beer, Drink Beer, his own appropriately thoughtful beer podcast. But his most important podcast is This Week in Rauch Beer, all about smoked beer, a favorite of mine, which you may have picked up on. The latest episode of This Week in Rauch Beer, TWIR to its fans, is a panel discussion of smoked beer by some great brewers of these phenolic wonders that took place at a very smoke-forward brewery, Dovetail, in Chicago. It's a place that I love visiting, and I will always lay down the big money to bring back a cooler full of smoky treats when I do. You can find this episode co-listed with Think Beer, Drink Beer on Spotify or Podbean, just like Seen Through a Glass. And I heartily recommend that you do so. It may come out on April 1st, but it is 100% serious. Cheers. That's the show. Thanks to Steve Kurian for the interview, and thanks to Captain Dan and Ron Rovansek for taking the time to talk to me about their operations. You know, everyone who I interview on Seen Through a Glass deserves my thanks, and yours, for taking the time out of their day to talk to us. They're almost all running small businesses, sometimes very small, and it takes a lot of time and effort. That really came home when I talked to Captain Dan at the Bloomsburg Farm Market, and he kindly stood and talked, taking a break occasionally to serve a customer. I want all my guests to know that the time you give me and my listeners is very much appreciated. You can find pictures for this episode on Instagram at Stag Podcast and on Facebook at Seen Through a Glass. If you're listening to the show on the radio at WSOV, there are over 50 more episodes to enjoy, including a Milheim episode and an Valley episode, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podbean. Really, all the popular podcast outlets. If you'd like to toss a bit in my hat to keep the show going, I have a coffee button in my Instagram link tree. That's at Stag Podcast and at the Facebook page. And a huge thank you to my friends Mark and Eileen McLaughlin for a substantial donation to expenses. I may finally be able to get those better mic stands. You know, I wanted a Pennsylvania fish story for this episode, but there are no salmon in the state. No Atlantic salmon swimming upstream to spawn. No big fish ladders on the Susquehanna dams at Conowingo, Holtwood, Safe Harbor, and York Haven. But what we do have is eels. American eels are found in the Susquehanna largely because of the efforts of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the power companies who own the dams. They literally scoop up little eels by the thousands and truck them from the Conowingo Dam to Harrisburg and dump them back in the river. You see, eels are kind of like salmon, but backwards. They live in freshwater most of their lives, and they swim downstream to spawn in the ocean, specifically in the Sargasso Sea, the great accumulation of seaweed in the mid-Atlantic, which is also where all European eels spawn. You think that's weird? Let me tell you, I've got so many weird eel facts. Do like I did. Follow the Surprised Eel Historian on Blue Sky or Twitter to learn more interesting stuff about eels. What's coming up? Well, I got a great interview just a few days ago, one I've wanted to get since we started, but I need some other material to go around it, so I think I'm going to go with one about another local food producer, making great stuff way out in the woods of the Pennsylvania wilds. Until then, thanks for listening. This is Lou Bryson with Seen Through a Glass from the smack dab center of the Keystone State.